Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our Marshwatch Newfoundland sessions. We are on our eighth and final session this week. It's pretty crazy. The 2 months have flown by, I feel like, but spring is on its way, so it's a good time for us to be wrapping up. I am in Pennsylvania today, which is the land of the Susquehannock. And that was a confederacy of 20 smaller tribes living in villages across along the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. So, been learning a little bit about them. Um, as usual, though, we are going to be talking about species of birds that are in Newfoundland and Labrador, not in Pennsylvania. So, we are talking about the lands that are from the Mi'kmaq people, the Mi'kmaq, the Inuit, the Innu, and previously the Beothuk. My name is Jenna McDermott. For those of you who are new for this final session, Catherine Dale is here as well. She's my colleague. We both work for Birds Canada, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to engage people through science to protect the birds we love. And as I've mentioned before, MarshWatch is just one of many different programs that volunteers can get involved in to collect data for bird conservation. There's a couple other programs that are running as well at the moment in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Nocturnal Owl Survey and the Short-eared Owl Survey. They'll be starting up soon. So if you're interested in getting involved with those or any of the other Birds Canada programs, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you out. Pretty easy agenda again today. We are going through our final birds, and then we'll have a little quiz, and then just one quick slide of wrap up. I'm not doing a big review of all of our species that we've gone over, firstly because everything has been recorded, so you can find them all online, and also because it would take actually for hours. So we're just going to wrap up, and then if you want to review anything, you can do that on your own time at your own pace. So. We might go a little bit over just a few minutes, 10 minutes or so today, depending on how quickly I speak, I suppose. So we are covering our warblers today. We have 6 species of warblers to cover. They are generally pretty tiny little birds with sort of needle-thin bills. They're often brightly colored, as you can see from the ones on the slide. A lot of bright yellows involved with warblers. And they're really quick and sort of flighty. So it's difficult a lot of the time to get a good look at them or a long look at them. But we'll point out the best cues or best markers as always. And there are obviously more warbler species in the province and the region than those on this slide here. And the ones that we're going over today are ones that are all associated with water and wetlands, of course. And so that often means that they're going to be in dense, low vegetation. And so these warblers are kind of lower to the ground, skulking around kind of warblers. But a lot of other species are often found higher up in the trees, foraging around up there. So we're not covering a lot of those super high up warblers, but we're doing a lot of the lower down warblers today. And then we're also going to be covering 3 different sparrow species. And again, of course, there are more sparrows than this in Newfoundland and Labrador. If you want to get a full rundown of all the species on the island of Newfoundland that are there during the summer months, you can go to a webinar series that Catherine and I put on a few years ago. You can find it on the Newfoundland Breeding Bird Atlas channel on YouTube, and you can find a full series of ID videos with all of the species, not only the wetland ones. So just take a look at that if you want to. Some more species that we haven't covered. Okay, with that being said, let's get into our warblers for the day. So we'll start off with the Northern Waterthrush. It is a pretty unusual looking bird for a warbler because it looks more like a thrush, which is, of course, in its name, water thrush. And thrushes are a family of birds that the American robin is in. And so they're often found walking on the ground, long legs, sort of large body with an upright posture. And we have the Northern Water Thrush displaying those behaviors in that sort of shape and posture as well. So it's a pretty large warbler. It has long legs and it hops around for the most part on the ground rather than flitting around too much in trees. If we take a look at its markings, you can see on this page we have males and females. You can't really tell them apart. So they all have a brown back and wings. They have this pale eyebrow that goes all the way from the bill, all the way behind the eye, down the back of the head, and sort of skinnier at both ends. And then they have a pale underbelly that is heavily streaked with brown streaks and down the breast and the belly as well. And these pale areas on the bird can either be sort of the coloration of the main picture there, just like a pale whitish color, or they can have a kind of yellowish tinge as well, like the bird on the bottom left. And so that's the underbelly as well as that supercilium or that eyebrow. So just take note of that variation that you can have. Northern water thrushes are pretty skulky around on the ground, but they do have a really loud, distinctive song. And so it is sort of clear notes that fall in pitch and also get faster. I think it sounds kind of like it's angry and yelling at us. I know Catherine has said she thinks it sounds like it's a ball bouncing downstairs. You can decide for yourself what you think it sounds like, but here it is. Should play once more, I think. So that's the Northern Waterthrush, and it is quite a loud song, which is nice because you could hear it over, rivers and that sort of thing, which is often areas where they are found. Um, I'll just note also quickly before we get into the rest of the species that I am going to play all the songs for the birds today. And they are pretty distinctive songs for the most part, but it can take, of course, a pretty long time to remember or learn all of the different species songs. So, just because they're distinctive and we're going through them doesn't mean that I expect you to remember them suddenly tonight or that you will likely remember them tonight. But just so that you can be aware of what they sound like. And then the best way to start learning, bird songs is to kind of start with the ones that are common to you nearby that you can hear pretty frequently and sort of build your song library from there. Um, so just take it easy, take it slow, and don't be too hard on yourself for learning bird songs. One to play again. Okay, the northern water thrush, along with the warblers generally, are insectivorous, so they're eating insects. But as I mentioned, the northern water thrush is spending most of its time foraging along the ground, typically at the edge of the water or in shallow water as well. You can see this one on the top is wading in the shallow water, and they'll be picking prey from inside the water or along the edge of the ground there. And much like some of the previous species we've talked about, the spotted sandpiper during the shorebirds week, and we have one coming up later. The northern water thrush bobs its tail and rear end up and down as it walks around. So that's a really good cue to know you have a water thrush as well if you don't get a really great look at them. They are eating, as I mentioned, insects, so a lot of different ones, adult insects as well as larvae, spiders. They'll pick snails out of the water, little clams, small fish if they can grab them, or even salamanders in areas where there are salamanders. They are ground nesters. You can see a little nest there, nestled underneath of some little plants in the moss. And they are associated with wet areas that have dense ground cover. So in Newfoundland and Labrador, there's a lot of areas that are like that. They're not necessarily only found in wetlands in Newfoundland and Labrador, because there is sort of the general landscape is kind of wet, even in the middle of the forest or moist. And so there's a lot of appropriate areas. And so you can find them even in the middle of the woods in Newfoundland and Labrador. Elsewhere, they'll be a bit more associated really with wetlands like wooded swamps, bogs, as well as sort of wetland edges that have a bit of shrubs in them. And they are typically found near standing or slow-moving water rather than really large rushing streams and rivers. Um, and I'll also just mention that um, I guess we'll go to this slide here. They are found from east to west across, the boreal forest and a little bit farther south as well. Down in the United States as well, they stay year round. Um, if you live in the eastern United States, though, make sure that you look up the Louisiana water thrush, which looks pretty similar. Just be aware that there is another species there that overlaps in range. But we do have them across Newfoundland, the island, pretty widespread, and in Labrador as well, sort of up to the tree line, basically. Our next warbler species is the mourning warbler. It is obviously a bit of a brighter, more, more exciting looking colored bird. It's a bit of a chunky warbler. It's a bit larger than a lot of the other warbler species. It has a bit of a heavier bill, but it does have this pointed bill, which all the warblers have. They're using to grab insects, and it's a very secretive bird. So it can be really difficult to get a look at a mourning warbler, especially a female. Um, the male and female have some similar characteristics. This is only males on this slide, but he has a gray hood, which is where they actually get their name, Mourning Warbler, because when they were named, it was reminiscent for folks back then of the mourning veils that they wore over their heads during, a period of mourning or a funeral. So the mourning warbler has on this gray hood for its mourning period. The mourning warbler also has a bright yellow belly as well as undertail, so yellow all the way down the body through to underneath the tail. And then the back is sort of an olive greenish color with maybe a little yellow in it. It's a bit variable in color. And then they actually have pale pinkish colored legs, which is a bit unusual, but often, difficult to get a really good look at, of course. The male specifically has this black chest bib, so just sort of a black splotch in the middle of the chest. And it can be variable in size, but they do always have some black there. And they also have dark lores, and lores are the section of their face, which is between the eye and the bill. And so you can see the photo on the bottom has a darker section there than the photo on the top. Again, a little bit variable, but the males will always have some darkness there. The adult males on the island of Newfoundland specifically show especially blackish lores compared to mainland birds, especially as you go farther out west in Canada, which is an interesting little plumage variation geographically. Males will sing rather from the insides of vegetation rather than from an open area above the vegetation. And so even if they're singing, they can be difficult to get a look at, but this is what they sound like. Play that again. And so because of their sort of sneaky nature, they are often heard more than they're seen. But you can get a look at them if you're patient and stick around. This is the female here on the page. Again, she has similar characteristics as the male in that she has that full gray hood that is, over the top and bottom of the head going down the throat and into the breast. This bright yellow belly and undertail, which you could see really well on the right-hand photo there. And olive green back and those pale pinkish legs again, of course. And then the female looks the same as immature birds who haven't gone into their full adult plumage yet. And so you can't really tell those apart, but they have also these white arcs above and below the eye. So rather than having a full white ring around the eye, they just have an arc above and below. And so the male didn't have that, and the female also on the breast doesn't have that black bib. Okay, so mourning warblers are found in early successional areas, and that just means areas that have been disturbed. So they've either been, dug up, or the trees and shrubs have been mowed down. There's been fire, storm, logging activities, that sort of thing that disturbed the forest. And then you have this new growth coming in, and so they really like this dense shrubby undergrowth. Because they are found in these areas that have been recently disturbed, it's really only good habitat for them for, 10 sort of years before it's too mature of a forest. And so they're sometimes called a fugitive species because they're often looking for a new habitat that they can live in, and that's normal for them. In Newfoundland, these dense shrubby undergrowth areas are often associated with water, and so you can often find them in the province in shrubby swamps. But they can be found in drier areas as well, where you have this proper sort of vegetation that they're looking for. Um, Again, we have an insectivore. They are typically feeding on the low areas of the vegetation as well as on the ground. So they'll be picking insects off of the branches and the leaves and the ground, and they're eating things like caterpillars, the beetles and their larvae, spiders, and then they'll also take some berries as well, especially during the fall, I imagine. Mourning warblers will often pretend to have a broken wing to lure predators away from the nest. So we've talked about that before, the distraction display. With a lot of our shorebirds will show that behavior, but a lot of the warblers will do it as well. I've seen it sometimes during the summer when I'm out walking a trail. I had one time a northern waterthrush, which we just talked about, doing that on the ground, and mourning warblers will do that as well. So mourning warblers don't have such a widespread range. They are found on the island of Newfoundland, not really in Labrador. Um, they can be a little bit in southern Labrador as they disperse after the breeding season, but otherwise not really found there. And then they are found in sort of a strip across central Canada and live year-round in the eastern United States. They do go down to Panama and Colombia for the winter. Our next species is the common yellowthroat. It's a really distinctive warbler, which is really nice, and also not quite as secretive as the mourning warbler. So you can get a look at the males. A lot of the time they will pop up to the tops of the shrubs and other vegetation to sing. So it's nice you can get get a nice glimpse of them. They have a really small pointed bill, much thinner than the mourning warbler, for example, and they are quite active. So they're always flitting around, but they are a little bit secretive, especially with females. But as I said, the males will pop up to sing. So this is the male on this slide here. He has this super distinctive black bandit kind of mask that's going along the face, and then the top edge of that is a nice contrasting white or kind of silvery color. He also has a bright yellow throat and breast, which is nice since their name is common yellowthroat, so it's a good way to remember what they're going to look like. And otherwise, he's a bit duller around the rest of the body, so he has kind of dull olive brown upper parts and no markings on the wings or anything like that. The belly is pale, and then if you go look at the undertail coverts, which are those feathers just under the bottom of the tail, they are yellow. Um, the color of those feathers down at the bottom of the tail is really important for those warblers that are spending time up at the tops of the trees, so not necessarily the ones we're talking about today, because a lot of the time you're only looking at the underside of these birds, and so knowing the color of the breast, the throat, the belly, and the undertail is really helpful for distinguishing species. The common yellowthroat sings this witchetty, witchetty, witchetty song. The dialect in Newfoundland is very strong and quite different from elsewhere, like Ontario, where I first learned the common yellowthroat song. And so if you are living elsewhere or traveling, just be aware they might sound different than this. So that is, for the most part, the male common yellowthroat singing. This is the female here on this slide. Again, we have the same size and shape. So she's a small little bird, that small pointed bill, and she's pretty active as well, but definitely more secretive than the male. So it's a bit harder to get a glimpse of her a lot of the time. They're quite sneaky. She's generally more drab and indistinct compared to the male. She doesn't have that big black mask. She's kind of this drab olive brown across the back. She does have yellow on the throat, and you can see there it comes in variable amounts. So you can have a really bright yellow throat like that picture on the top, but then it can get more muted, like the other two photos as well. So there will always be some yellow, but it's not necessarily super bright and obvious. That being said, the color of the throat, even if it's not super obvious yellow, will always contrast quite sharply with the darker color of the face. And then she does show a faint eye ring, which can be pretty difficult to see, of course, if you're only getting a quick glimpse of her. But no markings on the wings or anything like that either. So she's pretty unmarked bird. Common yellowthroats are found in these dense low vegetation as well, which is often associated with a lot of different types of wetlands. They can also be found in dry areas, but they're really looking for that really dense low vegetation where they can skulk around and feed. And they are feeding on insects and spiders, other insects that they can find. And they're plucking those off of the vegetation and also from the ground a little bit as well. Common yellowthroat is super widespread, doesn't go super far north though. It is likely found in southern Labrador a little bit more than this map indicates, and it is pretty common across the island of Newfoundland. And you can find it pretty much anywhere else as long as you don't go too far north in North America. Alrighty, moving on to the yellow warbler. The yellow warbler is a super bright, super distinctive, nice little drop of color in the forest, or I guess not the deep forest, but in shrubby areas as well. Some folks will call them canaries in the province. So if someone says they saw a canary, it's probably a yellow warbler. And they are pretty easily visible because of this super bright plumage they have. Again, we have a really small songbird since they're a warbler. They have a bright yellow body all over. The back has a little bit of a greenish tinge to it, but is still yellow. And then they have that classic warbler kind of bill, sharp bill, but it's a little bit stouter than some of the other species. And a really good cue for the yellow warbler is, of course, that full yellow plumage, but also that they don't have any markings on their face. It's fully a plain yellow face. So no eye rings, no eyebrows, nothing like that. We have the male on the top here, these top two photos. He will display these chestnut streaking down the breast, and the one on the left there is really prominent, has a lot of streaks. It's not necessarily always that streaked, but they will have some. And then the females who are on the bottom there don't have that chestnut streaking unless they're an older female, and then they might show a little tiny bit, but the males will always have more. During the non-breeding season, they look basically the same, but they'll just get a little bit duller or maybe a little bit greener in the back compared to the summer. Yellow warblers have this really sweet song. People like to describe it as saying, "Sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet." So it's pretty quick. Sweet, 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 I'm so sweet. And you can hear that pretty widespread across, all of North America. They are, again, eating insects for the most part, things like midges, caterpillars. They love some caterpillars, some beetles, leafhoppers, wasps even, and they will occasionally take some plant material as well, seeds and berries, that sort of thing. You can see it on the bottom left there, they have a little nest. The female is sitting on a little nest and the male's there on the branch beside. Um, but they can be pretty tricky to see, but they are very active in the bushes there, and so you often get a glimpse of them. They do also like the sort of disturbed or regrowing environments, and that's often associated with wetlands and streams as well. And they're specifically love deciduous shrubs, so they are often found in alders and willows. And so in the province, that is a lot of the time along those at the edges of those woods roads. And so they can be found elsewhere, but that's a lot of where I've seen them before. The yellow warbler has a gigantic range across North America. Um, they're they're like basically found everywhere, except for not quite as much in the northeast there. So you'll find them across most of the province and elsewhere. Next up, we have the palm warbler. The palm warbler is, again, tiny little songbird. It is another species that will wag its tail up and down as it goes around foraging, so that's a nice mark. If you see this bright yellow bird and it's wagging its tail up and down, you've probably got a palm warbler. And there's actually two subspecies of palm warbler. So the one that we have in Newfoundland and Labrador, the eastern one is fully yellow underneath. But then if you're out west in Canada, you will get the western version, which has a pale belly. So it's got a yellow throat, pale in the middle, and then yellow under the tail again. So again, just something to be aware of. Males and females look the same. During the breeding season, they are this bright yellow underneath, like the two photos on the left. And then they have a brown back, no markings on the wings. And then a really best cue for the palm warbler is that rusty cap, that sort of reddish brown cap. It is always there, and it is always quite easy to see. They do have a dark eye line. It's not super sharp, but there's a dark line that goes through the eye. And then above that, sandwiched between the dark eye line and that rusty cap, is a really brilliant yellow eyebrow. So that contrast there is really good to notice for the palm warbler as well. And then they also have these rusty streaks along the breast that can look a little bit similar to the yellow warbler male, but that yellow warbler, of course, is yellow all over. It doesn't have the rusty cap. During the non-breeding season, they get much paler and far less bright and colorful. So you can see that one photo in the bottom right is in non-breeding plumage. They basically have the same patterning, but it's all in muted browns and whites rather than yellows and browns. They have a fast, buzzy trill for their song. It sounds a little bit insect-like, and it is a little bit variable in how fast it is or how much it goes up and down within the song. And it can often be confused with other similar songs from other species like the swamp sparrow and the dark-eyed junco. So just be aware of that. But this is what they sound like. So it is sort of this dry trill. Sounds almost like an insect. So the palm warbler doesn't spend a lot of time foraging in the trees. They feed a lot of the time on the ground. And as I mentioned, they do wag their tail up and down the whole time. Even the young of the year will already be wagging their tails up and down. So that's a fun behavior to watch and also really good diagnostic behavior. And they will also sometimes sally out to get insects as well. And so that's that behavior that we talked about with the flycatchers, where they'll start on the branch, fly out, catch something in the air, and come back to eat it. Or they'll even hop up from the ground and sort of grab something from a branch overhead. They are insectivores again. They're eating things like beetles, flies, caterpillars, and then they also will eat in the winter seeds and berries as well. Palm warblers really like open shrubby areas, so they're not really found so much in like a marsh or that sort of area, but they do love bogs and fens, so peatlands. They're really common in peatlands, especially where there's a lot of shrubs in there as well, um, or where there's a border of trees along the outside edge. They could also be found in drier areas that have this open shrubby kind of layout, and that's in places like power line cuts or weedy fields and that sort of thing as well. The palm warbler is one of our most northern breeding warblers. And because of that, Canada's boreal forest is estimated to be the home of around 98% of all of the palm warblers in the world during the summer. So that's pretty cool. We do have them throughout the province, mostly on the island of Newfoundland, but also throughout central Labrador as well. On to our next species, we have the Wilson's warbler. Um, you might notice we're giving through a lot of yellow birds right now. I have the male and the female both here on the slide because they do look very similar to each other. So the male's there on the top, female's on the bottom. Again, we have a small little bird, small songbird. The Wilson's warbler has a really thin black bill, quite pointy, and they have a beady black eye. Because their face is so unmarked, it pops out really well when you're looking. But anyway, that's not the best mark. Males and females have similarities where they have an olive sort of colored, olive greenish back and wings. Again, we have no markings on the wings, no bars or anything like that. They have a bright yellow underneath and face, all the way down. And then they have a yellow eyebrow that contrasts with a darker cap. And so, of course, their whole face is yellow, so the yellow eyebrow doesn't really stand out compared to the face, but it does stand out compared to the cap. And you can see on the males, the cap is a sort of crisp black cap, much darker and more distinct than the female, which is here on the bottom, which is more of an olive-colored cap, or sort of like a dusky dark cap. And sometimes older females can also get a little bit of black in the cap as well. But either way, they will have a little bit of a darker hat on, and it will contrast with that bright yellow eyebrow. I have that picture on the top right of that male just to remind everybody that you can catch birds during photography looking super, super weird. This guy's all feathered out. It looks like he just had a bath, maybe. Just a quick reminder about that. The Wilson's Warbler has a song that is a series of really pretty quick notes, quick and clear notes, and it sort of has two different parts. The first will be a bit higher, and then the second part will be lower. So this is what they sound like. I hope everyone can hear that. I'll see if I have it all the way up, I think. I'll play that again. And so the speed of that of the notes can vary a little bit between individuals, but it does have this sort of higher section and then a lower section after. Playing it again. So Wilson's warblers have similar habitat to the ones we've been talking about before. They are really looking for those dense, deciduous shrub stands. So a lot of the time we're talking about willows and alders in our area of the country, and they are often associated as well with streams. Sometimes they're found in wet meadows as well. And I'll just note again that in Newfoundland, they're not necessarily found near streams as much as in other places because we generally have a lot of water in the ground, sort of all over the place. And so you might find them a little bit farther away from streams than elsewhere in their range. I have seen them a lot of the time on the island of Newfoundland in the alders along the sides of woods roads, especially if it has a little bit of wetness in those alders along the edges. So just a little note there. They are ground nesters in most places, but in a couple of states, I think, they have also nested in vegetation. They have cute little nest there you can see on the bottom left. And unlike most songbirds, where once the nestlings fledge and leave the nest, they don't ever come back, Wilson's warblers actually will come back to the nest for a night or two after they fledge, just for, I guess, a nice, safe place to stay, which is pretty unusual. Again, we've got a species that is eating mostly insects. They're eating a lot of caterpillars, beetles and larvae, spiders, flies, and bees. And they will feed in several different ways. They will walk along the vegetation and pluck these insects off, or they will hover underneath and sort of grab them from the undersides of the leaves, as well as sally out. So fly out, grab something from the air, and come back to the branch to eat it. So a few different ways that they will forage. The Wilson's Warbler is found from east to west, and they are found throughout the entire province of Newfoundland and Labrador, so anybody can find them in those shrubby areas. I'll just take a quick second to look at the difference between the yellow warbler and the Wilson's Warbler females, because they can look pretty similar, especially if you're not getting a great peek at them. The Wilson's Warbler is here on the right, yellow warbler female on the left. And they are pretty generally yellow birds, both of them. The Wilson's Warbler has that olive crown, which sometimes isn't as distinct as you could see in this photo, but it will always have that bright yellow eyebrow compared to a little bit of a darker cap, whereas the yellow warbler female just has yellow all over the place. And then also just note that if we look at the wings of the yellow warbler, all of the feathers are dark, but they're edged in yellow. Whereas if we look at the wing of the Wilson's warbler, all of the feathers are dark and they don't have that yellow edging. So those can be a couple of things to look for if you are not really sure what this little yellow skulky bird is. Okay, moving on to our 3 sparrows of the evening. Sparrows as a family can be pretty difficult to identify sometimes. A lot of the time they're just called little brown birds by people because they are little and brown and they are hard to get a good look at. They're pretty small. They all have this same kind of bill that's short and conical, and it's a really strong bill format which they use to crack open seeds, which is the main food for most of these species. They are difficult to get a good look at because they fly quite directly from place to place. So they hide in the shrubby area, they'll pop out, fly directly to where they're going, and just dive right back into the vegetation again. So they can be a bit frustrating to try and get a good look at. They are found more often on the ground or lower in the trees. They're not really a top of the tree kind of species or family. And because they're pretty difficult to get a look at sometimes, the song is pretty important, but if you do get a look at them, the important things to look at are patterns along the breast and belly and patterns in the face. And so we'll just go over the facial markings of this song sparrow here, but in a field guide, these names will be used for any family, but it's really convenient to use it to show it on a sparrow because this one is showing all of the different marks. So first we have the crown, the top of the head, that's often colored with one color or with stripes. Then we have the supercilium or eyebrow, which is the section of feathers that goes from the bill over the eye into the back of the head. Then we have the eye line, and that goes from behind the eye back towards the head. And sometimes there can be darkness ahead of the eye as well. Which is the lores, that section just behind the bill. Then we have this sort of area which covers up where their ear opening is, which is called the auriculars. That's kind of the cheek patch, I guess. And then we have the line that's called the moustachial stripe, which is my favorite, I think. It's the one that goes often a dark line that goes from the corner of the bill back downwards towards the neck. Underneath of that, we have there's a couple of different names that are used, the either submoustachial stripe or the malar. That's often a pale section. And then underneath of that, there's the malar stripe, which is often a dark section. And then we have the throat underneath. Oh, and then also one more at the back of the neck is called the nape. And so these are sort of the main terms that are used to describe the plumage, the feather areas of birds on around the head. And so for sparrows specifically and other species as well, looking at the variation in color or the presence or absence of these sections can be really helpful. On to our first sparrow, the Savannah Sparrow. This is sort of a medium-sized sparrow. It has a pink bill that has some dark edges along the top. Really only helpful if you can get a really close look at them. The best thing for the Savannah Sparrow is knowing that it has sharp streaks along the breast. It has a white belly though, so the streaks don't go down that far. And then the really best marker for Savannah Sparrow is this yellow eyebrow. So they always have some yellow in front of the eye, closest to the bill. And then sometimes it extends a little farther back. The yellow is a little variable, but they will always have a little bit of a yellow wash there above the eye. They also have a dark eye line, so that's right behind the eye. They have a brown back, sort of streaky, as well as brown crown stripes, that white belly that I mentioned, and then they also have a dark smudge that is in the center of the breast, sort of where all of the streaks have conglomerated into one dark spot. The Savannah Sparrow really loves open areas with not too many trees. So you can find them in a few different kinds of habitats, like peatlands, they'll be pretty common, open grasslands as well, sedge wetlands, or even salt marshes if you're in a coastal area. And they can be pretty difficult to take a look at. So again, the song is going to be really helpful for them, which we'll get to in one second. They do eat during the breeding season, mostly insects and spiders, so they'll pick those off the ground or low vegetation. And then in the winter time, they will also take vegetation like grass and forb seeds. They have a really nice song that they basically say their name. So they say Savannah. And that sound can travel pretty far over these open areas. And savanna sparrows are found widespread across North America. So we have them throughout the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and then they are found, all the way out west and up into Alaska as well. Our second sparrow is the swamp sparrow. The swamp sparrow is a little bit bigger, medium-sized sparrow. They have a nice, solid gray face and collar that goes down back to the nape, which is that back of the neck area. They have a dark eye line, goes behind the eye. And then really the best mark for the swamp sparrow is this bright rusty brown cap. Often they'll have a little bit raised as well if they're a bit agitated. And then also they have really reddish brown wings as well, and their wings are quite short. So a lot of our sparrows are sort of a more grayish brown or like a solid brown. The swamp sparrow has really this reddish hue generally with that reddish brown cap and these reddish brown wings. It also has a pure white throat, and then the breast is unstreaked gray. During the non-breeding season, there can be a little bit of smudgy streaking on that gray breast, but during the summertime, it will be a clear gray. This is another species that has a trill for its song, so it can be difficult to distinguish from the palm warbler, which we had earlier, and the dark-eyed junco, which we're not going through today, but it is found in the province. And so it sounds like this. It's a little bit slower. That being said, I did say it's a bit slower, but individuals can vary in how quickly they sing their trill, and so some of them could be a bit faster than that one that we just heard. And they'll sing from the tops of little trees or inside of the vegetation as well. So you might not be able to see them if they're singing, but sometimes they are sitting out. And swamp sparrows are found in wetlands of all sorts, not just swamps, but they do, of course, like swamps as well. They can be found in shrubby peatlands and in freshwater marshes, as long as there's vegetation where they can nest and perch in and feed from. So they do love as well some willows and alders, like a lot of these species we've been talking about today. The swamp sparrow is omnivorous, but they do eat during the breeding season, mostly insects. They'll take aquatic and terrestrial invertebrates because they are associated, of course, with these wet areas. They will pick things off of the vegetation and also from the ground. And during the non-breeding season, mostly, but also in the summer, they'll eat seeds from grasses and berries and fruits. I think this individual in the bottom center photo is likely collecting that fluff for nesting rather than for eating. Swamp sparrows are found throughout the island of Newfoundland and southern Labrador, not so much in the north of Canada, and you can find them, going out pretty far west up until basically the Rockies and down in the US as well. Okay, our last sparrow of the evening is the Lincoln sparrow. It's a pretty small sparrow. If we work from the top to the bottom on them, you can see that they have brown stripes on the crown. Then they have a broad gray eyebrow underneath of that. Then they have a brown eye line underneath of that. They have a little bit of a buffy eye ring, buffy sort of straw color ring around the eye. Again, might be difficult to tell unless you get a really good look at them. And then something that I actually only realized when I was making this this webinar for tonight is that they have a buffy or straw-colored malar, which is that section underneath of the moustachial stripe, which is the one that comes straight from the back of the bill. It's the top arrow there. And that is always this buffy or straw color, and it contrasts with the white of the throat. And I've never noticed that before, but it's quite distinct in all of the individuals I've looked at. They don't necessarily show all of the time a super strong malar stripe, which is the one that borders the throat. But even if that stripe is not there, the buffy section or straw-colored section is going to contrast with the white throat. The Lincoln sparrow, I think, is a very distinguished looking sparrow. It has very fine, distinguished striping on it. On the back, which you can see in the bottom middle photo, the bottom right, it has really crisp black markings on the back. So a lot of other sparrow species will have kind of more messy, less black compared to brown. They're more brown generally. But the Lincoln sparrow has these crisp markings along the back, and on their undersides, they have this buffy straw color going across the breast and down the flanks as well, down their sides. And it has these really fine dark streaks in it as well. The Lincoln Sparrow has this interesting sort of bubbling kind of warble song. I don't know if that was very loud. I'll try and turn it up a little. It's a bit hard to describe that sound, but it's quite distinctive compared to others that we have. They do sing quite extensively during the early breeding season, but they'll actually basically stop singing mid-season, and then they all start chipping at you, standing in the trees like this one up on the top right, and just sort of yelling at anybody who goes by. And so they often look like this bird here on the top right, with a little bit of a crest raised up, and they are quite intent on people passing through, and they will be pretty easy to get a look at, especially later, or in midsummer. Lincoln sparrows are really an open area sparrow as well, but they do require some scattered shrubs or short trees, and they will sit up on those and do their singing, as well as foraging. So in the province, we find them a lot of the time in peatlands with a lot of shrubs on the edges or some little short trees in the middle. And you could also find them in these wet, meadowy areas as long as there's some dense deciduous shrubs. You can really see on the photo on the bottom left that distinction between the white belly and the buffy straw-colored breast and sides, that is distinctive to this Lincoln sparrow. Lincoln sparrows are mostly insectivorous during the breeding season, and so they will spend their time picking for insects on the ground and on vegetation, and they will also sort of scratch at the ground as well to dig up or disturb insects that they can pick up and eat. And then in the winter time or non-breeding season, they will also eat grass and shrub seeds like all these other sparrows have. Lincoln sparrows are found, as you can see, pretty widespread. They're found on the island of Newfoundland, not as much on the Avalon Peninsula on the east coast there. And they are found in Labrador up pretty high north as well, up until you get into the really mountainous areas. Okie dokie. And that wraps up our species for tonight, and I guess for the whole series. We'll take a quick second to sort of do a little bit of wrap up. As I've mentioned in the weeks gone by, all of the recordings are available on the MarshWatch Newfoundland website. If you, we have it on the next slide, but if you don't remember it, you could just type it into Google or whatever browser you have, MarshWatch Newfoundland and Labrador, and it should pop up. I will note to folks that our Birds Canada website is undergoing some major overhaul in the next few months. So at some point, the website link won't be right anymore, but it should redirect to wherever it is housed in the new website format. So just so you know, that's going to be coming up. I will be sending out in the next few weeks a participation survey that we'd really appreciate if folks could take a couple minutes to fill out. Won't be very long, just to help us with our reporting for the folks who give us the money to run these things. And any comments you have, that sort of thing, for us to improve the webinars, and sort of convincing funders that this is a good use of their money. So when that comes out, it'll just be coming to your email like all of these reminder emails have, and I'll appreciate folks doing that for us. Of course, the most important thing is to enjoy the wetlands around you. So spring is coming pretty soon. Down here in Pennsylvania where I am, it is fully spring. The birds are building nests, so it's coming up to Newfoundland soon enough, even though it might still be snow. So yep, definitely enjoy that. And if you're interested in submitting checklists to help practice, or get some of your data into our nature counts database, you can register for nature counts and submit any MarshWatch checklists from any wetland at any time. So you can review last week's series, and I think there's also a little video on our website that shows you how to use the app in a bit more detail. And then also we have confirmed funding for running this series again next winter. So if you're interested in coming back again, we will be running these over again. And feel free, of course, to share the info with friends and let them know, or family that who might be interested. So we'd love to have you back, and any new folks are interested as well. And with that, we're done, I guess, for the evening and for the season. So feel free to reach out to us by email, of course, at any time. You can get Catherine or I at that NL Atlas at birdscanada.org. There's the website below, MarshWatch-Newfoundland, where you can find the recordings. One last thank you to Wildlife Habitat Canada, who funded this series. The funding for their granting program comes from the sale of the Canadian Wildlife Habitat Conservation Stamp, or Canadian Duck Stamp, which is available for the public to buy, or is mostly from game bird hunters who are required to purchase with their license. So thanks to Wildlife Habitat Canada. And thanks to all of you for coming out and sort of enjoying birds in the middle of winter. Hopefully, you feel a bit more confident about identifying some of these and can see them when spring comes to you.